Mel, one of the most admired and appreciated characters in the Arcane series, a multifaceted woman with many dimensions to her personality and motivations, not to mention her impressive wit. I think I speak for most people when I say there was never a dull moment whenever she was on screen. Between her and Ambessa, I guess it runs in the family, people heavily speculated on which characters from Arcane could make an appearance in League, which only brought more intrigue when we found out both of them were scheduled to arrive. Yet upon their inclusion, public opinion towards the Medarda family went from positive to negative rather quickly, not necessarily as characters, but as champions. Ambessa quickly took over the metagame by way of an extremely versatile and high carry potential moveset. Mobility, percent health damage, shields, armor penetration, battle healing, AoE, the whole 9 yards. And while she certainly bears the brunt of a great deal of backlash, she still more or less falls in line under the same strengths and weaknesses of your typical skirmisher, overloaded to some extent, but not explicitly any better or worse than what we already have. I don't think I can say the same for her daughter though. Right upon release and carrying all the way over to now, Mel wasted no time garnering a reputation for being the most hated champion in the modern day. Plenty of cast members get a bad rap for one reason or another, but even in defense of like Shaco, historically the most despised champion, sentiments towards him were primarily based on, annoyance. Whereas against Mel, it's more visceral frustration if not outright anger. Mel was so overwhelmingly toxic to deal with that despite having among the lowest base win rates out of any champion ever, she consistently averages a 20% plus ban rate, on several occasions reaching all the way up to 50. People do not like this champion, and even though she got a mini rework not too long ago, resentment towards her remains at an all-time high. So for today I wanted to revisit Mel and look into just how we can potentially fix her, that is if we can even fix her at all. Back when I posted my Everything Wrong with Mel episode, I brought up how predictable her situation was gonna be when you considered the fundamentals of an artillery mage. As a refresher, and also for people who haven't seen that episode, in essence, the reason fighting Mel is such a frustrating experience is that she possesses a counter ability on the one class that shouldn't have one. Rebuttal belongs to the same line of defensive abilities that, if you successfully manage to defend against what it's intended for, it practically wins you the trade or fight. Jax's Counter-Strike is another such example. Suppose a Renekton burns W while Counter-Strike is up. No matter what either player does after, Renekton's practically guaranteed to lose the trade or fight going after. Conversely, if Renekton holds off on using a stun and baits Jax into wasting Counter-Strike, then most likely Renekton can win the trade. This game of chicken interaction is present across all champions with the counter-type ability: Fiora, Pantheon, Jax, Mel, Gwen, Vladimir, Nocturne, Sivir, Yasuo, and so on. Typically, in order to beat them, you had to force them to burn their counter ability early. Notice, however, a major distinction between those champions and Mel. The vast majority of them are short-ranged if not outright melee, right? On the other hand, Mel is a long-range artillery mage. Granted, she doesn't have quite as much reach as the Zerath or Ziggs, but let's be real, no one has as much range as them. Point still stands, Mel has long-range poke. Now, as overpowered as counter abilities are, they're kept in check by the relative urgency in needing to use them. Yasuo has to burn Wind Wall to give him a fighting chance at beating ranged opponents. Therefore, most counter abilities have to be used predictably, allowing for that aforementioned game of chicken. When I said Mel belongs to the one class that shouldn't be allowed to have such a thing, I was referring to the notion that being an artillery mage, Mel essentially always wins the game of chicken. Having a neutral game as strong as she does, Mel can repeatedly and consistently exert pressure, meaning if the opponent doesn't do anything to fight back, she will automatically win by default without even having to use her W. Few champions, if any, have the same neutral game that Mel does, and so there's nothing outright pressuring her to preemptively cast Rebuttal. The only abilities that can reach her from that distance are usually what? Projectiles, stuff like Ash Arrow, Thresh Hook, Morgana Binding, what have you. Casting those attacks at a distance affords Mel the privilege of being able to cast W on reaction, having plenty of time to see them coming, and therefore neutralize the threat of it. Again, what keeps counter abilities fair, and I say that in heavy air quotes, is that the user often has to preemptively use them, lest they risk taking heavy damage or getting hit by a critical enemy ability. Or in other cases, said counter ability can only counter one specific attack, as is the case for Nocturne and Sivir, whom you can toss a less important ability first to be absorbed and then your actual ability following shortly after. Mel's status as an artillery mage alleviates that onus, letting you force your opponent to use the specific ability she can counter out of desperation or in a predictable fashion, to which she can not only block, but turn that ability against them, forcing them into a catch-22 situation whereby if they don't use their core ability, Mel can and eventually will break them down with their poke. But if they do use their ability, they get put in an even worse position, ultimately being a loss no matter what. The typical way to counter an artillery mage, and often only way, is by using long-range engage yourself. but Mel can shut down those types of abilities. Kind of like an electric-type Pokemon with Levitate, the main and only weakness of electric is ground, but Levitate lets you bypass that weakness altogether. Were Rebuttal on any other champion, it wouldn't be anywhere near this infuriating to go up against. Sure, it would still be frustrating, make no mistake, but it wouldn't have caused this much controversy if it was on a fighter or tank, for instance. Not only that, but Rebuttal by nature is an extremely overpowered skill by way of having every single benefit of a counter ability into one. Number 1. Rebuttal counters all relevant abilities during that time frame. Compared to Sivir and Nocturne, who can only block one ability, Rebuttal can block a theoretically infinite number of projectiles during its reactivation. Number 2. Mel can move during this time. Many defensive attacks like Casante's Pathmaker, Vars Riposte, and Aurelia's Defiant Dance can completely shut down certain champions. However, the inherent counterplay against these moves is that they also root the champion in place, in and of itself presenting an opportunity for you to counterattack. Number 3. The counter is omnidirectional. Usually the more things a counter move can block, the more restrictive it has to be. Bronze Unbreakable can intercept and destroy all projectiles, but only in the direction he's facing. Pantheon's Aegis Assault renders him immune to all damage, but again, only to sources originating from the direction he's pointing in. In Mel's case, it doesn't matter where the hell the projectile's coming from, it's in 360 all around you. Mel has all of these properties in addition to the greatest payout of any counter ability without question. Prior to her, Vars Riposte was the only counter ability that actively punished you for using crowd control carelessly. Sure, other champions gained a benefit if they successfully blocked your move, like how Nocturne's attack speed passive doubled, but generally speaking, you were never in a worse position than if you didn't use your ability. When fighting Mel, not only does Rebuttal destroy your projectile, but she fires an identical copy of it right back at you, and unlike Riposte, where you can work around it by stepping out of Vars' line of fire, Mel can return all incoming projectiles in the direction of the original caster if it's a skill shot, and if it's a point-and-click projectile, she point-and-clicks it right back at them. It is bar none the strongest counter ability in the game for having the least number of restrictions, countering one of the most common types of attacks in the game if not the most common, and also having the biggest payout of any counter ability. That Rebuttal has a cooldown almost as long as an ultimate ability is proof that Riot is completely aware of how stupidly overpowered her W is. Bear in mind, everything I said is in reference to her W after it got nerfed. To think that her W used to be a full second long and make her invincible to all damage, even non-projectile ones. I mean, how the hell did that even make it to live servers? So you may have noticed that I spent this entire video so far complaining about one single ability and pretty much nothing else. There's a reason for that. Like I said in my Everything Wrong with Mel video, it's not any one specific part of her that makes a champion such a problem, but rather that very specific combination of factors that should never be put together on the same champion. Rebuttal is a f***ass ability, but even in spite of that, it wouldn't be that bad if it was on a melee champion. Like if you think about it, a melee champion is under a lot more pressure to use W for self-preservation than a long-range artillery fire champion. Mel, however, is in a position to abuse it the most as a result of her particular design. Basically, she would be completely fine if she had anything else but Rebuttal. Her passive Q, E, and Ultimate are relatively inoffensive. I mean, her E was a bit overpowered when it first came out with the 2¼ second AoE root and all that, and her Q was practically undodgeable, but for the most part, they weren't the end of the world. What caused them to be so game-breaking was their W. The pressing concern is that so much of her identity is tied to Rebuttal. Every single champion in this game has a gimmick of some sort to distinguish them from each other. Mel's unique aspect is her W, meant to be an in-game representation of her special power in Arcane. If you take that away from her, it might make the champion more tolerable, but it also kinda defeats the purpose of Mel being Mel. At this point though, perhaps that is a risk worth taking. The community is almost unanimously fed up with the champion, and in the state she's currently in, it's safe to say Mel is a lost cause. She has by far the lowest win rate of any champion across multiple roles. In mid lane, second only to Smolder, Mel's a full 1% less win rate than even Azir. No one should be weaker than Azir in my opinion, not the least of which a character as straightforward to play as Mel. In bot lane, once more, bottom tier, support's even worse. She is so bad she's a full 5% win rate weaker than the second worst support in the game. If you pick Mel, you are effectively grieving. Combining Mel stats together across mid ADC and support, she has a 45% win rate. Statistically on average, if you play 1000 games, you win 450 of them and lose 550. By all measures and estimations, Mel isn't just a balanced nightmare, she's a balanced failure. That a champion can have a statistical profile this miserable, yet still draw the ire of so many players, Mel isn't a 200 years champion, she's a 400 years one. Backlash towards Cassante, Yone, Pike, Aphelios, even Yumi wasn't anywhere near this bad. There's no other way you can put it. Mel is a totally bricked champion. Attempts to rework her back in earlier this year have not only failed, they further confirmed what prevailing wisdom has believed ever since Mel came out. She cannot be fixed by adjusting her balance and numbers. They tried that. They made her Q easier to avoid by increasing the cast time and making the blast radius smaller. They made her W no longer give her invincibility, instead gaining a very short lasting shield and gutted the movement speed buff on it. They made her E shorter and smaller in every way, shape, or form. This wasn't a rework, they nuked her, and yet despite that, memes of Mel Aviv or Nurse to her prompting people posting the Hitler dead picture on Twitter continue to spread like wildfire. No one enjoys playing against Mel because the experience of playing against her is so polarizing, not that she's overpowered. So then how can we fix her? I hate to say it, but Rebuttal in its current form has to go. The root of all of her issues stems from the fact that she can reflect projectiles, despite that being one of the only consistently practical ways to counter a champion like her. Now, she is entitled to some semblance of protection, not saying she shouldn't be allowed to have any defense. In that case, what are some possible avenues to pursue? Likely, the simplest answer would be to just get rid of the reflection altogether. Anti-projectile skills have been a thing since 2014. Yasuo Windwall, Braum Unbreakable, Samira Bladenwell. Frustrating, yes, but there are workarounds. What I think tips Mel's W over the edge though isn't that she destroys projectiles, it's that she can turn those projectiles against her opponent. Now, the impact of what she reflects can greatly differ from one attack to another, blocking a Karthus auto attack as opposed to an Ash Arrow or a Blitz Hook. Again, however, since Mel has the benefit of range, she can be a lot more discerning about when she uses W, and so she naturally leans towards getting the most benefit out of her counter ability. By contrast, someone like Fiora's Riposte has a more uniform effect. If she blocks immobilizing crowd control of any kind, scale, or type, her return shot is empowered to stun, potentially leading to a greater payout than if she reflected the original crowd control in question. However, this evens out on the flip side as well. There's only so much her W can do even if it does reflect something. Mel doesn't even need to reflect a hard CC ability. If she turns away ultimate against his team, or Jinx Rocket, or Janna Q, that can be equally as devastating if not more so. To that end, make Rebuttal just like Riposte. Instead of reflecting the same exact projectile, you can make it so she fires a bolt of damage back to the original target that deals a base amount plus a portion of the damage the original attack would have dealt. In other words, no crowd control, no debuffs, nothing. Just damage. It would still destroy all incoming projectiles and sting if she blocked a particularly strong one, but it wouldn't make it so a Thresh or Morgana would be better off if they didn't use their primary engage tool. Another option, and in my opinion the more interesting one, would be to change the form Rebuttal takes in-game. Using Arcane as a reference, the first instance of Mel using it on-screen was to save Caitlyn from getting executed by Maddie. Notice, however, the specific way in which it was used. Mel didn't jump between them and encase herself in a prism that reflected the bullet. She created a rebound field around Maddie that reflected the bullet back at her, almost like Maddie was encased in a glass prism that reflected her shot, bouncing all over the walls. That can create a meaningful layer of skill expression and simultaneously counterplay. By having to mark a target area that reflects projectile shot within them to be turned back around, it creates multiple new interactions that can allow her to keep the original purpose of the ability while making it far less toxic for the game for herself and for her opponent. One of the biggest issues with her W is that it's too good for how unconditional it is. Anytime Mel feels like something dangerous is coming her way, she presses W and prays. If, however, she had to create a field around a target area, that can address two things. 1. The Mel player needs incredible situational and positional awareness in a fight. She can't just become a human reflector, she has to mark an area where she thinks projectiles will be firing out of. In a team fight, there could be stuff coming from all directions. The Mel player has to choose which area is the most threatening. With our current Rebuttal, if a Jinx Rocket was headed straight towards her from the front, meanwhile an Urgot was about to ult on a nearby injured teammate from behind, you would have to make a choice on which one to stop. You can't deal with both. 2. It forces the Mel player to actually use it preemptively, predicting when her target is about to fire their most important ability, and if the opponent can bait it out, they can either wait the duration of her W field or simply walk out of it before firing their shot. With this new hypothetical W being a prism field that reflects projectiles only fired from within and not all around it, Mel has to cast W before they fire their projectile and not after. By switching her W from reactive to proactive, it adds more ways for the Mel player to accidentally whip her W cast. Bottom line, we can fix her if we just change the way her W works to either not be that overpowered or make it far more challenging to land to actually justify that payoff, then in my opinion she'll be in a much healthier state. What do you guys think about the ideas I presented though? Do you have any of your own? you're welcome to share in the comments. That'll be all for today though, so if you enjoyed the video, I would appreciate it if you could leave a like and subscribe. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Vars and join my Discord server, and check out my other champion discussion videos if you haven't yet. But till next time, thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.